This episode of Everyman's Arsenal podcast is proudly sponsored by Nocturn Industries. Introducing the Daisho Bridge, seamlessly connect two night vision monocles to create a powerful dual tube setup. And don't miss out on the Chimera, Nocturn's panoramic night vision goggles. Upgrade your night vision game at nocturnindustries.com and use discount code TLDCO. Nocturn Industries, lighting the night for Everyman's Arsenal. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Everyman's Arsenal, a podcast dedicated to learning more about the people and the gear that you might see on the Thin Line Defense Go YouTube channel. And this one's kind of a special one. Today, we're going to have someone from the TLD team, and we're just going to talk about those things that have either made us laugh or cringe, specifically shot timers and why they suck. What's up, Walsh? Welcome to the Stir the Pot episode of Everyman's Arsenal podcast.
I think this is so funny because this one has really been bothering me. So the audience probably doesn't know, but I've been talking to Jason behind the scenes forever about this. I was like, man, I want to just get into a deep-seated conversation after seeing so much stuff on Instagram and YouTube and so many influencers who use shot timers, right? And where this came from, and this is going to help you come down the rabbit hole with me, is I saw somebody and listen, I know they have the best of intentions. They're trying to show like how quickly you can do something. And he has a backpack on, right? So he runs a shot timer and the timer starts running and he opens up the backpack and he assembles this whole firearm, puts it all together, and he looks at the clock and he says, like, he fires one shot and he's like, 9 seconds. And I'm like, dude, there's no basis.
What's that compared to?
Right. Like, was that somebody who's in another state? Like, are you dealing with a threat that you don't even know exists? Are you really in a threat scenario going to just sit there for 10 seconds and just fiddle with a backpack? Like,
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering because I've talked about this on the live chat, and that's something else that we talked about is we really enjoy the live chat because it's a time. Our Thursday night live chats is a time for us to engage with our viewers, but sometimes these conversations that we may want to have as a team and kind of give our viewers a thought, a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of what our thought process is. It's hard to do on the live chat because we're talking over each other. There's delays, there's things like that. So
the commenters,
this one-on-one, you're probably going to see Joe on one of these episodes and Cody on one of these episodes. It's kind of like a Peter Griffin. You know what really grinds my gears? But I totally like. What are you comparing yourself to? And it's sometimes in a vacuum something might look good, but then other times you're like, this is 9 seconds is garbage to draw. And sometimes you could train yourself into something that you shouldn't be training yourself into. Like you get into a habit that could be really, really bad for you.
and sometimes too, like there are some drills that I think are good basic ones to measure, like build drills and ones that everybody do. And I have no problem with that. I think the value of it is low. Like maybe is a good comparative. And like I like to use a shot timer super rarely to know my split times. Like I know what my split times are. I don't share them because I think they're useless data and I think they're not good for an audience to have. Like how we know there's a certain Instagram or YouTuber that does everything with a shot timer, and I don't agree because he'll just make up a drill, right? So just make it up like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do 2 shots over here, 2 shots over here, and 1 shot over here, and he's obviously practiced it all day, and then run the time and show us. I'm like, bro, I have no context to this thing you literally just made up.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you think as a parent of older kids and teenagers, one of the things that I talk to my kids a lot about is like, hey, be careful who you try to idolize on social media because what you are seeing is the best of that person. It's what that person wants you to see. You're not seeing all the failures, all the work that it took to get to that point. And so I think it's kind of similar in the gun world. If you watch someone and you're like, man, they did that drill in 2 seconds, I can never accomplish that. You can kind of be depressed about yourself when it's like, well, as long as you are doing better than you a week before, no problem. Like that's a great thing for you to do.
Yeah,
So
and And you bring up a good example because there can be influencers who, and not only across the firearms industry, but across all influences that show their family and show their
Yeah.
Christmases, and they don't show like their kids getting beaten. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
like the horror, like they're trying to show off this fake life that doesn't exist. It exists in the 37 seconds of the short, but doesn't exist in reality.
Yeah.
And that's why there's some YouTubers who I generally give a little bit more credit to, like Bon Bon, because she shows the failures. So
Yeah.
because they're funny and they're reality. Like, hey, here's the reality of the world we live in. Here's me bobble and stuff. And like I put them at the end of like the
Oh yeah.
the,
All the
the
time.
clips at the end of when we're training, of me dropping mags and stuff, because half those training rounds, like, I'm having to speak something, I'm having to move something, I'm having to then reload, and I'm having to think and process through so many different things at once that something's bound to go sideways.
Yeah.
So we still include them because it's funny, but I would tell people, much like you're saying, with like, pay attention to who you're watching, pay attention to who's willing to be flawed. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, like how many times has Lucas said, "Oh, that was a super horrible run. I hope
Right.
I never run that slow again." Never. He's never said.
Yeah.
I mean, I
You
won't
don't.
say never. I won't say never. He probably has. He probably has. But like, it's not the consistency of like, let's get better together. It's, I've already been doing this all day. Let me show you this now that I've been doing it all day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, oh man, it's just an interesting thought. I know people are going to get really upset about this because we're probably going to have some type of fancy timer title that says something like "Why shot timers suck,"
I
and
hope
our
so.
discussion is less about shot timers and more about, um, I guess, this false belief that people that show you how fast they are using shot timers, that they're always like that, when the reality is they're not. And you bring up Bon Bon, like some of her videos that she puts out are purposefully meant to be funny. Like the timer goes off and she draws a wooden spoon and throws a wooden spoon at the target. Right, there's some humor behind what she's doing, and I think a lot of people understand that. She trains
Regularly.
multiple hours a week, and she talked about that when we had her on the podcast. It's kind of um, something that I would like to live up to eventually. Like, I wish I could train as often as she does.
Here's an idea I want to propose to you, though. Like, let's take a really, really amazingly good and fast shooter like Milspec Mojo. It's interesting because as the skill level increases, the requirement for having a shot timer goes way down, right? I don't need a shot timer when I'm watching Milspec Mojo shoot to go, holy moly, that's fast,
Yeah,
right? So it's interesting that like the need for the shot timer goes down as the skill level goes up, right?
yeah,
And maybe people are using it as a training tool, but I don't know. If I suddenly I'm out, maybe I'm just the crazy one. Maybe I'm the one that's going to make everybody mad. Like, if I do a drill and it's a 1.8, now I'm doing it at 1.7. I don't care. Like,
yeah. Who cares?
I don't care. Like, or I did it at a 1.7. Now I trained for 3 weeks and now I can do it at 1.1. Sweet. I think it's just because we go through so many, like, our range is so wide, from gear to long range shooting to like short range pistol shooting. Like, if I trained on pistol reloads for months on end, then another skill falls off, right? So it's like,
Right.
I don't know. Where is the point where you're not really getting any return on the training anymore? Like, maybe that's why we don't harp so much about it. If I was a competition shooter, maybe it would be more important.
Yeah, I could see that, but you know, the kind of the joke this week, for those of you that we're recording this February 24th, and this past week was the week of acorns. And if you know what I'm talking about, there was this shooting that occurred where this police officer, an acorn fell on top of his vehicle. He thought that the person that he had handcuffed in the backseat of his vehicle somehow had a gun after this
With a
person had been
silencer.
searched twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, had a gun with a silencer and was shooting at the cop. The cop did like a stop, drop, and roll.
Hold on.
And
We were corrected. That we were corrected in the comments because I want to make sure that's right. It was a barrel roll.
it was a barrel roll. Yeah, I mean, so the cop and the cop said he was hit. Like, talk about your adrenaline had to go through the roof. The cop then unloaded, I think it was 3 magazines into his own vehicle
Oh,
and
and
didn't.
also went from cover. This is my favorite thing that Joe noticed.
Yeah, yeah,
Went
yeah.
from cover out of cover, right? So it's like, what are you doing? So go ahead. Go
But
ahead.
but was so fast to return fire and didn't hit the suspect one time. So now let's take that into this idea that we're talking about with shot timers and like speed of drawing and speed of shooting. Like he was really fast getting gun out of the holster and bullets on, well, not
And he
on target, but
and he
getting
probably
bullets
trained
out of
that.
the gun.
Yeah.
And he probably trained that. Like,
Pow.
okay, yeah, from the hip, pow, but he missed. So what's the point of being fast if you're not going to hit your target? Now, thank goodness he didn't hit his target because the guy was innocent. He wasn't shooting at them. But that's just an idea of like fast isn't always good.
Well, yeah, and it can be like right. It all comes down to like how you're trained. Like you're exactly hitting it right. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about going to the defensive elements class with defense mechanisms guys, because they do something that Jawless Hog kind of eased us into when we were doing the initial night vision stuff. Is it's a lot more about working through a thought process, working through problems. If I can draw and fire quickly, that's great and all. Like,
Yeah.
I've locked in that skill, but that's the 2% of the process. I need the
Yeah.
98% of my brain power to determine, like, wait, how could he have a silencer? How could the situation
Right.
exist? Weren't
He'd
they
been
still
searched twice,
handcuffed? Yeah,
handcuffs
like,
behind his back.
but then not thinking of any of those things and then relying on, oh, I can draw in a point eight. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how fast does your brain work? Does your brain move? You can I can move my hands faster than my brain, right? I can
Right.
do actions by training them that I didn't even notice I do. Like I come up when I come up and draw, I put finger on trigger as I come out. This is the way I've trained finger on
Yeah.
trigger because at this point I've already decided a horrible thing has occurred, right? And I have to draw. So we're coming up finger on trigger, and by the time I come press all the way out, I'm on the wall, if not starting to press through it. So if if I had already made that call in my mind or like just jumped a whole level, now I'm whoever it is, like random person now has a pound away
Yeah.
from that system firing. Like
Yeah.
it, and exactly what you said, it's all about how you train. If you train to draw fast, great, but you need to be able to identify the targets. And I think I really want to get into this because I think that's the piece we're going off super tangent. I like it, but that's the piece that nobody's really talking about is target ID, and
Yep.
and I know we're going to get into it a lot in our night vision
Defensive
series.
elements.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
in our night vision series, because the Dirty Civilian actually did a really good video about this that I watched. Like, how far away can you determine? He did this kind of the same thing. If someone's holding a cell phone or a pistol
right.
with night vision on, and dude, at 50 yards, he was 50-50
Guessing. Yeah.
guessing at 50 yards. And then we're sitting there
Yep.
saying, like, oh, my illuminator needs to go out 300 yards. Like, bro.
Well, and what you're saying reminded me of this active shooter school situation training that I went through. This was years ago, and the scenario was a lone law enforcement officer. You have an active shooter in the school, and you had to clear rooms by yourself. And so, one of the things that I remember happening as I was going across a hallway from one classroom to a next classroom, out of my peripheral, I saw the bad guy, and we were running sims, so we had mask on and long sleeve clothes and stuff like that. And we had the bad guy had like fake grenades. They would just make loud noises. So he threw a grenade. I go into the classroom, wait for the grenade to go off, and then I come back out. I know where the threat is. I know he's down this hallway, and so my gun's drawn. And when I get about halfway down the hallway, um, a hostage comes out of the room that the bad guy was in,
Mm.
and I plugged him, bang bang. And it was funny because these are all people that I worked with at the time, and so the guy goes down because I shot him twice, and he goes, "Why'd you shoot me?" And he falls down. But for me, it was like, I think that's going to happen in those types of scenarios for law enforcement officers. I didn't stop and check on this person because I know that there's still a threat down there. So I
Mhm.
just had to ignore this innocent civilian that I shot and move past him to still go after the threat that I know is down there. Like once the threat's neutralized, then I can go back and render aid. But I know that there's still this threat. So exactly what you're talking about, like even in a training environment where my heart rate's up, target ID is paramount, and I failed in that one. Like I shot the wrong person. So I was
Even like,
fast. The guy came out, man. I plugged him
yeah,
twice, but target ID, it was the wrong person. And if
super.
that was a real life scenario, like I ended some innocent person's life, that would have been horrible on me. Like imagine how I would have had to live through that for the rest of my life. So target ID is key. Fast doesn't always mean better.
No, and so I got two examples here, and one is we play a lot of games with our friends here on the channel, a bunch of viewers, and one of them we play is Ready or Not, which
Oh, I
is a
love
game where we play co-op. But like it stinks because when it stinks and it's good when you go down, you have to wait until the end of the round. It could be 20 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. You're just waiting. So you can shoot your teammates, you can injure teammates. This is all video game. YouTube, don't freak out.
yeah.
So we have to be very careful, but we kind of cheat and have our names above our heads so we can tell where the teammates are. But we've had a couple instances where we haven't had that on, and you want to be instantaneously fast because the enemies and the threats are, but you have teammates everywhere, you have civilians everywhere. You just can't be that fast. So it, again, we're going back to the shot timers. Even if you can draw and fire at a point 0.8,
Yeah.
there are so few situations where that would be extremely useful. Let's say you go into a school, right? You go into a school and you Jason, you draw at a point 0.7.
Yeah.
I know you can draw faster and shoot faster than anybody else in here. And you go in there, is that a valuable skill in a school? No. No,
No.
it's not. And so I think it was either Tim or one of the other training classes were telling me about um, whenever they show the target, people are so threat focused. So they'll have like the dummy or what, the target, and they'll have either a pistol in their hand or like a cell phone. And
Yeah.
every single time they go in there, they shoot the pistol or the cell phone. They don't shoot the person. And he's like, I think he was telling me, I'm probably not supposed to share this, but that's okay. It's probably great data for someone else. But he's like, he could put a pie plate around whatever they're holding, be it a cell phone or a pistol. People get so threat focused and don't spend the time to process. I'm sure that's what the class is all about. They don't process what the information is about, that they just shoot at whatever the threat is. Oh, it's a cell phone. Well, I shot it. And like, oh, don't do that. So
Yeah.
again, being super fast to me, number one, context matters. So it depends on what situation you're in. But also, if you can't process the information fast enough or faster than you can draw, that is it. It could be opposite of useful.
Yeah, yeah, but I think there's going to be a fine line because there's also those folks that if you take too long to identify the threat, you're dead. Like the threat is going to take you out before you have time
Totally.
to focus. And so how do you train that way? And one of the things that I could think of, we had this firearms instructor. I love the way that he trained. So we simulated a hallway into a room. This was at a firing range, but we put barrels down to simulate a hallway and coming into a room. And he had three targets up with giant circles, and he divvied them up into pies. And each section of the pie, there were four sections on each target. It was a random letter or a number. So it was like the left one would be 1D, C, 3. The middle one had four other random. And so he would yell out. We come in, low ready, and he would yell out a letter. Well, you had to identify the target, right? D is left upper section. Identify, engage. Okay, now the next target, identify and engage. And so being able to identify and engage your target and training that way, like, yes, you have to be fast because you have a threat with a gun, but you also need to be able to identify. And so how do you marry those two? Training that way, it's not always about hitting the person center of target, center of their chest. Being able to identify the correct target and engaging the correct target fast. It's a really tough skill, a really tough balance that people need to train in. If you're competitive shooting, like, yes, you want to hit the A, you want to be as fast as possible. Like, that's what matters. But in a real world scenario, like we saw with the Acorn Cup, fast isn't always great.
Well, like, let's put this scenario in, Jason, and you're such a good one. But let's say we're going to, you know, you and I, we're on a team, like we're doing something. We come to a situation, and we both are entering into a building because we don't want to go in solo. But there's no police. There's no one there to save us. We don't have time to wait for somebody else. People's lives are at stake. We're gonna put our lives on the line, and go help other people.
Yeah.
You're wearing a green shirt, and I'm with no hat, and I'm wearing a black shirt with a hat. We now have to pay attention to that,
Right.
right? Or if I told you, like, hey, I just heard word there is an officer in here undercover, or vice versa, he hears, hey, there's two other guys in there, one's in a green shirt, one's in a black shirt. The whole dynamic changes dramatically. I'm like, okay, I got to pay attention, or I don't. I mean, that would be horrible,
Yeah.
but I got to pay attention to who's in the situation on top of this, so that there's another level of that processing. Like, I would love to do a scenario like that where there's like, like we print out some targets or something, put them in some rooms and walk around and be like, hey, you guys need to go save the guy in a red shirt. But we're wearing nods,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, now not only we can't willy-nilly engage targets because we're trying to find someone.
Right.
There, we have to use, we can't tell what red is.
Right.
So I mean, so there's like, okay, well, we can't tell what red is. We have to white light illuminate everybody, so we can tell, we can see colors again now. Again, I'm just trying to lace it backwards to the original thing. Where does the shot timer come into that? Right?
Yeah.
Like, like where does, like, good weapon manipulation comes into play, like, all day long. Someone can, hey, if you can do a reload, manipulate your safety after every reload, do all your stuff. Great. The good weapon manipulation, I will tell you, all day is fantastic. And Joe sold me on that forever. But being able to draw and fire at a point 0.6, I don't know if I want that. Like,
Yeah.
you like that balance. Like, but I don't want, I want to draw at a 6 second either, right? That, like,
Right. Right. Right.
there is a too fast.
Yeah. Yep. And I saw that with my scenario, the one that I just talked about, where I shot that,
Mm-hmm.
it's using Sims. I shot that hostage in the hallway. Again, YouTube, we're talking about simunitions,
Yeah,
not real
not
guns.
real training. Yeah.
Um, but just training. So yeah, I was very fast, but I was very fast on the wrong target.
Mm-hmm. So, like,
And
and it's like,
so
such a good example.
yeah, but I tell you what, it has trained me to the point that I'm very good now when it comes to training scenarios like that. Target identification is what is constantly going
Mhm.
through my head. If someone tells me, hey, the bad guy is wearing a flannel shirt and he's got blue jeans on, I am looking for a person with a flannel shirt and blue jeans. And that is constantly going through my head. Joe talked about this. Joe and I went through the same schoolhouse, for law enforcement. And one of the things that they really harped on is when you're doing a warrant, as you're going through, you're constantly saying, you're yelling out police search warrant. And Joe was the simulated bad guy in one of these scenarios using simunitions. And he was in the bedroom, sitting on the bed sitting on his hands so that the police couldn't see his hands. The folks that came into the house, again, training scenario, did not identify themselves. They were not yelling out police search warrant. So they come into the room. Excuse me, they had guns drawn on Joe and they're yelling at him, show me your hands, show me your hands. And Joe's yelling back, who the F are you? What are you doing in my house? Because they didn't identify themselves. Now, thank goodness, training scenario, this is first time law enforcement school for a lot of these folks. So they were able to work out of that bad habit. But this idea of knowing what you're training, being consistent with it, identify your target, identify yourself. Going back to the scenario that you played out, like if you and I were going into an active shooting situation, I would make sure, like, hey,
Every corner.
you call 911, you better tell them green shirt, tactical girth, black shirt, Shaw Concepts, black hat. We're the good guys. Okay, you
Yeah.
be clear about that. Walsh,
Don't.
let's go in there. Let's
Yeah.
handle business. Um, Target identification is paramount in my mind.
And I think we have to move so slowly. And that's the interesting part is like, even if, and it would just be such an important thing, even if I could train at a point 0.6, like if I knew you could shoot that fast, that
Yeah,
would be more of a concern to me than not,
I love that.
you know?
So that reminds me of the Tennessee school shooting that occurred, last year. When you watch the body cam footage, this was the transgender person that shot up that
Mhm.
Christian school is the scenario I'm talking about. So if you watch the body cam footage of that, because the cops did not know where the threat was initially, they did exactly what you're talking about, and I loved it. It was such a great example of police tactical movement being slow, methodical, target identification. Because what they did, it was an unknown threat. They didn't know where the threat was. They didn't know who the threat was. They were going slow and methodical, classroom by classroom, until they heard gunfire. And then it was like, okay, we
Yeah.
know there's a target over there. Let's go. And so you can blow past all these classrooms because they heard the shooting coming from some other location. So I love that idea of being slow, methodical, until you identify the target. Then you can be fast, precise. But target identification, I think training target identification is more important than training speed out of the holster.
Yeah. And in CQB, we laugh about this, about how you want to pray you're never going to be in a CQB situation, because people like try to think of it as cool guy stuff. But if you play ready or not, you're going
Yeah.
to realize how much of a disadvantage you are. Like it is unlikely you are going to win. Like we can go
Right.
into so many of these
Yeah.
we are geared out, we're night vision, we have all this stuff. Yeah, it's a video game, all this stuff. But still they're just poised and waiting. They have all the advantage. They know the region, they know the area, they know who's there, they know who's whatever. So in that scenario, you're at such a massive disadvantage, particularly in like an end of the world scenario, like when all of society has collapsed. To go into a building, oh, it'd be the silliest, goofiest thing. Like, no, we're gonna outsmart that situation. Be like, I got my 10-5 for my CQB. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, you're gonna do great. Like, I have full faith you're gonna last about a day. Like, so I'll just know, let me know where you're gonna be at. But let me switch subjects to you to try to stay somewhat on how dumb shot timers are. Would you ever use a shot timer in a review?
In a
Like
review.
like
Oh,
like, okay, hey, here's a brand new X macro, or like weirder, here's a Flux Raider, and
yeah.
would you like go grab your shot timer?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I
Oh,
have a shot timer. I use it for personal, like I want to get faster doing certain things. I want to be faster transitioning from my rifle to my pistol, or I want to be faster out of the holster, whatever the case may be. It's a very specific goal that I have for myself, but it's just because I want to be able to say I had rounds on the A within 2 seconds, or whatever the case may be. That's just for my personal edification. I never train with a shot timer, but I'm not shooting competitively, so it's not that big of a deal for me.
yeah, and that's different, right? And I think we talked about that, and we'll caveat that if you're shooting competitively, 100% you are going for speed. You're trying to round every corner you can, so you can come and do your draw. And even Humble Marksman, he's an awesome guy. David, he's
Yeah,
amazing. He talked to me a long time ago about how there's a minimum amount of time required to marry your hands to get a good
right.
grip, right? And
Yeah,
I've come into that too, of like, yeah, I can draw faster than I can establish a good grip, but so then it's like I actually gain a ton more accuracy and consistency and speed if I draw a little bit slower.
yeah.
But there's also the argument first shots on target wins. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking of one of the guys that we met at SHOT Show this year was this guy Tom Castro, and he happened to be behind in the SHOT Show badge pickup line right behind Joe and I. Competitive shooter out of Florida, I believe. Tom is probably going to be listening to this, and he's going to be so angry that we're talking
Yeah,
about
it's great.
how much we hate shot timers. But his whole thing is he teaches competitive shooting. He shoots competitively. Fantastic guy. Shot timers are probably super important to him, and to make him a better shooter for his competitions. I don't shoot competitively. Like, it's just not my jam. It's not something that I'm into. Maybe I should get into it.
I
The
think context matters
fun
though
and
too,
yeah,
because like you give me and you both go shoot the bull and the Glock, right?
right,
And you're going to be wildly different times.
sure,
So if they looked at you and be like, "Oh, that's a horrible gun," or "Jason's horrible shooting the bull," and Walsh is horrible shooting the Glock, like, no, we've just never done these platforms. But then vice versa, you can say, "Oh, hey, like, oh, Walsh's times with the bull are realistic." Like, I don't think so. Like, not
yeah,
unless you're gonna go do a ton of. Same with yours. Like, hey, his time with the Glock's realistic. Like, no, I mean, it's a cool goal to have,
yeah,
but it's not going to be realistic in terms of like how much time you put into it. So it's just when you look at the just the time of a shot timer, there's so much more information that needs to be said in order for that data to even be valuable. Of like,
right.
what's the context? How long have you been training with this? Number one, is this your first day with it? Because if so, that matters. What's the situation you're in? Are you just blind firing everybody in the room? Because
Yeah, yeah,
then the data is useless. Like that's a situation that exists in your mind. Um, is this a time with you having to process and ID targets and then fire? Just the more you really start thinking about what you're doing with the shot timer, the more questions you have, and the more you realize, oh, this is just to sell. This is to sell
yeah.
insulin.
It's so kind of changing the subject a little bit, but it reminds me of a movie scene from The Wedding Singer when they had the limo driver speeding around the obstacle course to pick up the wedding folks and bring them back, and they were yelling. Adam Sandler's yelling at the driver. He's like, "You hit two cones. Those could have been guests at her wedding," right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Is someone comes in, they're all excited, like, I ran that whole course in 3 seconds. Like, yeah, but you shot four hostages.
Yeah. Or how many did you
But I did
almost?
it really fast.
Hey,
Like,
I almost
who
shot two of them,
cares?
but I didn't. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's just interesting where it comes to like the shot timer is to sell influencers, right?
right.
That's for influencers to legitimize themselves in some degree. But it's critically interesting that the better the skill level, like Mil
Yeah,
Spec Mojo, the less you need the shot timer. So it's really just legitimizing people who aren't at that tier in a
yeah.
way.
I
I
can
don't
see
know.
that. I love this. I mean, this has been an awesome conversation, and I love that Walsh had this idea of, maybe it's not always every man's arsenal isn't always about um, having influencers and brand managers on to learn more about them, although that's going to be a majority of it. But every so often,
We
we
just
as a team need to get on here and we need to vent a little bit, and do it in a way where we're not talking over each other like we are in our Thursday night live chats. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Walsh, I appreciate you taking some time and laughing with me and joking about shot timers and how useless they are.
and thanks for having me. I hope everybody blows it up in the comments. Whether you love shot timers or you hate shot timers, we want to hear all about it. I won't say we won't make fun of you, but we'll read them at least. No,
That's what we do, though.
yeah,
We'll make fun of you.
yeah, and you make
Awesome,
fun of
guys.
us.
Well, hey, we appreciate you being here. And as always, we are Thin Line Defense, and this is Every Man's Arsenal podcast. Hope you enjoy, and we'll catch you next time.
Go to StreamYard. It's like initialized.
Oh, look at that. What the heck?
Dude, every time.
Every time.